big thank you to Amin for introducing the Ismaili Centre to us. I think we all learned a huge amount there. First of all, I'd like to say a big good morning to you and a really warm welcome to the first London RE Hub conference. If not now, then when? And if not you, then who? A quote used by Obama, Gorbachev, Emma Watson, all borrowing from Hillel the Elder. Today, in this room, we form the beginnings of a cooperative network of RE practitioners in the London area and beyond. As we began this project, we realised that geographical boundaries were useful but not limiting. People have travelled far and wide to be here today. The internet and social media allows a whole new networking of sharing and support opportunities. We also have many more following today's conference on Twitter, so feel free to look down rather than at me and use the hashtag LondonRE. Already, many of you have started using that. The London RE Hub was formed in the summer of 2014 by a group of like-minded RE teachers who saw the need for further support and networking in the London and surrounding area. We used support that was offered by Culham St Gabriel's Regional Strategy Programme, as well as help from NatRe and RE Today to get the project off the ground. To those, we are very grateful and say thank you. The first conference here today aims to provide authentic, useful subject knowledge, accompanied by the legacy of a genuine hub of shared practice and support. Our stated aims are threefold. Number one, to establish a sustainable London hub of RE practitioners. Number two, to link Teachers RE with members of communities of faith and belief, to raise standards of teaching in our classrooms about the key concepts of religions and non-religious worldviews. And thirdly, to create relationships through joint working between all members of the RE community. Already there are 13 nationwide hubs that are operating very efficiently to raise standards, build research practice, and develop leadership capacity. This hub really is what you make of it. During the course of today, there will be over 100 people with representatives from many faith communities, with a notable number from our incredibly generous hosts at the Ismaili Centre. There are SACRE members, people from NatRe and Culham St Gabriel, those who have supported the conference, such as TrueTube and Oxford University Press, other organisations such as Faith to Faith, and many, of course, dedicated RE teachers. I hope I haven't missed anyone out. It really is up to you to get as much as you can from today. Meet new people, exchange contact details, share your ideas, and learn from one another. We've booked the room and organised lunch. We have arranged some great speakers and some excellent teachers, but the rest really is down to you. Please also keep in mind that during the day, 4 p.m. is not the end. It really is only the beginning. Thank you for sharing our belief that RE can be better and that we are the people to do it. If not now, then when? And if not you, then who? I do thank you very personally and hope each and every one of you has a fantastic and very worthwhile day.
The London RE Hub today brings together a group of people from more than one phase in education. And as a primary practitioner, it was suggested that I look at primary and secondary RE. Thank you for that suggestion. I think it was a good one, because there can often seem to be a gap between the two. Primary practitioners may not know everything there is to know about secondary RE, and the reverse is true. As Andy said, Culham St Gabriel's were instrumental in setting up this hub and the other hubs around the country. And a few weeks ago, Culham St Gabriel's set up a thinking day, which again brought together practitioners from more than one phase in education. And during that thinking day, some themes emerged, one of which was the importance of literacy based on systematic knowledge and understanding of religion and belief for good RE. Now, I'm not saying that everybody in the room had exactly the same idea about what religious literacy is. But what I am saying is themes such as this came from people and were brought up by people from more than one phase of education. And that gives me hope. That gives me hope that primary and secondary RE may agree in many areas. They may think and do the same sorts of things. So I started to think about this further. And I was thinking about my own time in primary schools. Because occasionally in primary schools, a class teacher receives their class in September. And they start to wonder, oh my goodness, what on earth are these children like? What on earth is their level? And perhaps what happened in the previous year that means their level is here, or here, or here. And we start to wonder about what went before. And I think actually that culture of wondering can be in many phases of child development and in many phases of education. So perhaps, occasionally, a university might be wondering, I wonder what the reason is that these first-year students are at this level. Secondary schools might be wondering, our year sevens are at this level. I wonder why that is. Is it something to do with the primary school? Is it something to do with something else? Primary schools, as I've said before, teachers occasionally wonder what happened year on year. And reception classes may well be thinking, I wonder why these children are perhaps like they are here. Nurseries, parents, and I understand that. As a reception teacher who said to a group of children at the start of the year to come and sit on the carpet, and the children look at me with these great big eyes as if to say, what is a carpet? You start to think, I wonder what their experiences have been before that. And as a parent of a young child, I do a lot of wondering. Is it the genes? Please let it be the grandparents. Surely it can't be me. So, I'm not saying this culture of wondering always happens, but I'm saying that it can happen. And actually, when I was in NQT and I was in Year 5, I did wonder. I did wonder big time what the Year 4 teachers had done with my middle maths group on fractions. They seemed to know about halves, they seemed to know a little bit about quarters and nothing else. It wasn't until 2 years later, when I went down and taught Year 4, that I was filled with a deep appreciation for what those Year 4 teachers had done before me. I suddenly realised what children are like at the start of Year 4 and how much they must have progressed before they came to my Year 5 class. Now, that's great for me. I got to go down to the year below. We can't all go and spend a year or so in the phase below or the phase above to find out what pupils in education are like there. So what do we do to find out then? Well, I would suggest that dialogue is perhaps a good way in. So I started by asking people just to let me know a little bit about RE in their phase. And I really thank everybody who gave me some answers, especially those people who are in this room today. So the first thing I asked was, what makes good RE? Primary teachers spoke to me. They said, starting off, building the understanding that you don't have to believe the same thing as other people. It is really basic at the start. Solid basic knowledge of the faith studied, understanding that there may be different views and perspectives within one religion. That is important. Exciting teaching and learning. That helps the pupils become interested in their RE, make progress. And of course, excited teaching and learning is memorable. Pupils at primary do not remember as much as we want them to remember, but if we're giving them memorable learning activities, perhaps they'll remember more than they would have done otherwise. Questioning, exploring and discussing, questioning themselves and the big questions that we always all hear about, relating it to their own lives, and quite a number of primary teachers brought up that it's more than just subject knowledge. The words values, respect, empathy, helping children to grow and develop as people were all mentioned. And to go back and coin a really old phrase, we're talking about the whole child. I wouldn't say with primary teaching, you just did that in RE. Actually, when you have a child every minute of every day of every hour that they're in school, you're thinking about that quite a lot of the time. Secondary teachers, one of the things that was brought up first, which of course I never thought about as important as this as a primary teacher, was the whole idea of good time management. If you are teaching GCSE and RE in 1 hour a week, I take my hat off to you. That hour will have to be really time managed, and the whole 2 or 3 years the students are doing RE will have to be literally planned to within an inch of its life, I would imagine. Subject knowledge came up in secondary as well as in primary. Teaching and learning to develop deep and critical understanding, helping students to deconstruct the big ideas and debate the big issues. Now, with primary, they said relate it to their own lives. Secondary said they could take this one step further. Their students can start to think about changes in disposition and relate it to RE. So if you do have a class and they are 14-year-old and you're teaching about Buddhism, can you remember what you wanted for your birthday when you were 9? Can you remember how fantastic it would have been if you got it? Can you remember just how much you wanted it? How embarrassed would you be if you got it today? So helping the students to see that perhaps things and wants aren't always permanent, and they can do that by looking at changes in disposition. Primary pupils, of course, haven't been around for that long and might not be able to reflect on changes in disposition in the same way. And of course, the teacher's own fascination with the subject, their general interest in the world, and how teenagers thrive and grow. So once we looked at what makes good RE, I asked, what would you like to tell teachers of the other phase? Primary teachers, to start off with, we are doing it. That is the first thing they said. We really, really are. Religious literacy is important. It shouldn't just be chalk and talk. Experiences matter, and they maximise pupils' learning. There are good RE primary teachers out there. Time to reflect and quality discussion is important. And the idea was reflected to me that primary teachers would feel very happy if they know that this is going on in secondary as well. We can try to ensure good basic subject knowledge. It will not be at the depths of secondary, and it will have to be age appropriate for our pupils. Empower pupils to feel confident with the big questions, both asking them and knowing how to go about answering them. And some primary teachers would love great CPD. It would be amazing if that can come from a primary RE expert. That person would know about RE and they'd know about primary. They might be thin on the ground, so perhaps help could come from other areas too. Secondary teachers, well, one of them described this to me as the secret. Actually, a few secondary teachers said the same thing about the secret, but they didn't call it the secret. They still said it with an air of embarrassment, though. And the secret of what they would like primary teachers to know about RE, I'm not sure they would like primary teachers to know, because otherwise it wouldn't be a secret and there wouldn't be much of an air of embarrassment. But the secret was that secondary teaching can tend to ignore what students have done in the past at primary school, and perhaps needs to recognise primary contribution more. It was suggested to me that perhaps a national curriculum would really help with this. I would have to say to the secondary teachers who answered that with a little bit of embarrassment and called it a secret, please don't be, because I would imagine there are times when the reverse is true from primary to secondary as well. It's helpful if students come into secondary with some subject knowledge. It helps secondaries if RE and primary is challenging, otherwise pupils can be at a very low level at the start of year 7. Students remember and love recounting good RE lessons they had at primary, and subject knowledge has to be gained by all teachers. You may be an RE specialist secondary teacher, you may not be a specialist, but even if you are, you may very well not have learnt what you are teaching your students in your own formal education. So you have to go out and get that knowledge. Subject knowledge is important for any teacher of RE, and developing your subject knowledge is important for any teacher of RE. So just to run through the last two things quickly, we then asked, what would you like to know from teachers of the other phase? Primary teachers wanted to know what secondary teachers think of primary RE, what happens in year 7, what knowledge and skills would secondary teachers like pupils to come into secondary with, in what depth do secondary teachers teach, and how can we best prepare pupils for year 7? Secondary teachers wanted to know everything. They did suggest that they would like to see some videos of primary teachers teaching RE on the internet. There are some on NatTre website, but perhaps some more could be made so secondary teachers could understand about how primary's journey through RE. And perhaps the reverse could be true. Some videos of secondary teaching would be great as well. They'd like to know more about the primary's creative teaching and learning strategies, more about primary skills in using formative assessment. How do primary teachers approach lessons? Do they enjoy teaching and planning for RE? Is it a tick box? And how can secondary support primary? And both those last two bullet points on those lists there are great, and in the spirit of what we're doing today, because both phase groups were saying, what can we do for the other one? So just to finish off then, quite a lot of what was said by the teachers related to transition and progression. Both lots of teachers knew that too many feeder schools is incredibly difficult for secondaries. Both lots of teachers knew that repeating work in year 7 and year 8 can be demoralising to pupils. Primary teachers felt there can be huge depth in primary, But if there is, and it's different in every single school, how can that be capitalised on and extended into secondary? So what do we learn? Well, as Andy said, 4 o'clock today is the start. Today, we are thinking about working together and making things sustainable. And perhaps there are teachers here who might choose to work cross-phase, not to be strangers, talk to people from another phase, talk to each other, visit each other's schools, see the depth other teachers go into in the other phase. They might go into more or less than you thought. You might be surprised. And think about how that might affect your own practice. If you can't visit another school and you can't find a teacher to talk to, perhaps one of the local groups. There are lots of RE networks about. Some are primary, some are secondary, but combined local groups can work so well for getting dialogue going. Ultimately, perhaps you might like to make plans for transition with each other so that pupils can have a successful, smooth journey in their RE. It would be great if pupils had a successful, smooth journey from year 6 to 7, but actually it's not just about that. It's about giving pupils a successful journey in their RE with progression and transition from reception until when they leave their schooling. And if we all, in primary and secondary, need to tweak what we're doing just a little bit, that doesn't matter. It's for the good of the pupils, their progression and their learning in RE at the end of the day.
None of us introduced ourselves, did we? My name's Kate, and I'm a teacher of RE. This is Julia, this is Andy, and this is Deborah. So I want to tell you about something that happened to me a couple of years ago. I was a classroom teacher, and my head of department... Oh, okay, may I stay here? Thanks. And my head of department became an assistant head, so I got the job of being head of RE then, with my colleague Ben, who I believe will be here today at some point. Thank you. Anyway, so the first thing we did was clear out the office, and we just stacked up in the corridor, ready to go into the skip. Years and years and years and years of stuff. Books that were written 50 years ago that hadn't been read for 20 years, and great yellowing stacks of worksheets. And at the top of this stack of worksheets was a bunch of worksheets on the Old Testament. I mean, they weren't as old as the Old Testament, but they were in that ballpark. And anyway, so we're getting this all sorted, and my old head of department, the new assistant head, she came past. She was shocked at what we were planning to chuck out. And she said, "You can't chuck away all those worksheets on the Old Testament." And I said, "Oh." And she said, "How can you be an RE teacher if you're not going to teach the Old Testament?" And I didn't have an answer for her. And I looked at these yellowing artifacts, and I just, in my head, what I felt that this was about as far away from my vision of good RE as I could imagine. But I couldn't articulate it. I didn't know what I meant, really. I didn't have an answer for her. And to be honest, it was quite an awkward moment. Anyway, so this same Ben, basically I pinched a book off him 2 years ago. I still have it. It's the 1987 Michael Grimmick Pedagogies of RE. I don't know if anyone has read it, but honestly, it changed my life. It's the first time I realised that there were different ways to approach RE. That RE was different things. Maybe religion is seen as a different thing, or education is seen as a different thing, and so religious education is seen as a different and specific thing. And I loved reading about these pedagogies because it kind of made that wobbly moment in the corridor with the Old Testament worksheets finally make sense to me. Oh, we have different approaches to RE, me and my old head of department. And we never sat down and talked about this, and we never talked about how I might approach something that to me is rather slippery and rather politically charged, like choosing to obey ancient religious teachings in the 21st century. And we never talked about how she would approach this. Okay, so when this veil of ignorance had been lifted from my eyes, I felt quite embarrassed. I'd been teaching for 9 years. I'd been 2 heads of departments by then, and I didn't know about the RE pedagogies. And I tried to kind of hide this fact. Then after all, I felt quite angry. Why hadn't anyone told me? I did my PGCE at Cambridge, for goodness sake, and no one there thought to tell me. And I thought, why hadn't someone helped me see, when I was training and learning and new on the job, that what I meant when I said RE was a particular thing, and there were other thinkers and other teachers who could help me learn, and there were other people meant when they said RE was another thing, like, for example, experiential RE or ethnographic RE. So it took me a master's and half a PhD to come across this knowledge. I mean, talk about occluded knowledge. Why is this RE theory so hard to access? I think it has led to mistakes. I think the general lack of our knowledge about the theory within which we work has led to mistakes. Some of you probably heard me banging on about this already, so I'm going to be really quick. But I think because we didn't understand much about RE's history and what RE was, we have allowed a very simplistic multicultural agenda to take over RE for the last 10 years, which was bestowed upon us by the new Labour government. I think we lost our way when society became more secular, and RE lost its confessional prestige. And we didn't quite know what we were anymore. And then we suddenly had this raison d'etre, and I think we welcomed that. And that's all understandable. How can I say this multiculturalism is simplistic? Because I've read about multiculturalism and multicultural education and critical multiculturalism and anti-racism in education. And I've read the critiques of all of them. And the critiques that apply to a simplistic and rather outdated multiculturalism now apply to RE. That culture or religion is understood monolithically or superficially. That no attention is paid to internal diversity and no attention is paid to external context. When of course groups are formed so much by their external context as their internal context, especially economic external contexts. If multiculturalism is framed as a solution to something, it kind of implies that cultural diversity is a problem. And of course, multiculturalism doesn't look at power, which is where the real problem lies, you might argue. Okay, so there is a response to the criticisms levelled at multiculturalism, which is called critical multiculturalism. It's tried to take on these criticisms and work with them and make multiculturalism better. And one of the things this field has come up with is the idea of critical whiteness. In 1996, Alistair Bonnet described whiteness as the thing against which everything else is otherised, but it itself remains invisible. Now, I would like to do some of this in my RE. I was looking at a very new agreed syllabus the other day, 2014 agreed syllabus, and I saw a question for a whole unit of work for Key Stage 3, and I almost fell off my chair. This was the question: what does the Holocaust tell us about the Jewish way of life? I mean, it tells us nothing, right? It tells us a lot about Nazi ideology. It tells us a lot about what ordinary people will do when they're following orders. If we want to learn about anti-Semitism, we've got to look at anti-Semitism, not its victims. So I would, as I was saying, I'd like to see some critical whiteness in RE for myself, although in this case it would be critical Christianity, and it would be focusing on the 2,000 years of focused anti-Jewish violence and persecution. Okay, so that's just me. That's where my reading and thinking has taken me. But I want to start living in an RE world where we can start to talk about these different forms and defend the positions we take and not kind of assume that we're all talking about the same thing when we say the word RE. And the reason I mention the badly thought out multiculturalism agenda from the past is because another one is around the corner. It's upon us. It's the very badly thought out British values agenda. And we've got to watch out for this. We can't let this subsume RE for another decade. There is cutting edge multicultural work, critical multicultural work out there, but you wouldn't know about it from reading the New Labour stuff. And the point is that RE teachers didn't find out for themselves. And RE suffered, and our children's education suffered. And there is cutting-edge critical work on what you might call the British values agenda, which is found in liberal philosophy and political philosophy, but you wouldn't know it from reading the guidance we've been given. But this time, we've got to be prepared for this. We've got to know what we're promoting. We've got to think for ourselves, and we've got to ask these difficult questions if we need to. Now, the anti-racism, multiculturalism stuff, that's what worries me about RE. It might not worry you, or all of you, and there will be other things about RE that might worry you that don't worry me. For assessment, for example, and might worry some people. I couldn't care less about it. But that doesn't matter. There's got to be room for all these different worries. We've got to feel empowered to worry, to think, to find stuff out, to do some reading, to do some research, and to point out to the people in charge of us that this is a really bad idea, and this is the reason why. We've got to have confidence in our skills, and we've got to have confidence that we can take RE and steer it into the 21st century, which is unbelievably 15 years gone already. Okay, so the point of this hub is to educate each other. There's no money, there's not going to be any training, there's not going to be any CPD, is there? No one's going to get a bigger budget, and no one's going to get more stuff for their classrooms and for their children. So we've got to do this for ourselves. We've got to make this time. We've got to come to conferences on a Saturday, and really, really well done to everyone for being here. We've got to read and we've got to research, Now, I like reading long-winded books about the philosophy of education a lot, but that's not right for everyone. Some of you will learn by observing other people, by talking to other people, by trying it out for yourselves. However we learn, we've got to take this on. We've got to take seriously this incredible job we do. I feel that it really has never been more important. So, can this be the start of teachers doing it for themselves? Thank you very much.